not mere inactivity, though. When we think about God ceasing from working, from ceasing from creating, we're not talking about God ceasing from all activity. We're speaking of God only ceasing the work of creation. Because we do understand that according to the book of Hebrews, chapter 1, verse 3, that God still had to uphold all things by the word of His power. You see, He had created all things in perfection, but had He ceased and withdrawn Himself completely and not continued to work in the providential work of upholding that which He created, then all that He had created would have ceased to exist. So when we talk about God resting here, we're not talking about a mere inactivity on the part of God. But what God has done here is He has demonstrated His absolute power and sovereignty in the acts of creation, and at the conclusion of that creation, He assumes the position of a sovereign, kingly rest. I have conquered, I have created, I have accomplished that which I set out to do, and God rested on the seventh day. And even that rest continued to demonstrate His sovereignty. You recall when David drove out all of the enemies of Israel from the land of Canaan, what was it said of David? God gave him rest from all of his enemies. And David did not, remember, David was a man of war. He was a man of battle from his very youth, and he had fought battles against the enemies of God all of his life, but there came a time in his life when God gave him rest. But David did not cease to be active as king. David began to reach out and bless those around him with the blessings that God had given him. And in much the same way here, when we talk about God resting, it's the rest of a sovereign king who has conquered, who has accomplished, and who is now resting in that which he has accomplished, yet continues to accomplish. So this morning, having completed and finished to perfection the whole of creation, omnipotence ceases His creative work and assumes a position of sovereign kingly rest in which He enjoys and celebrates the works of His hands. We find further, not only on the seventh day did God rest, but our text tells us that God blessed the seventh day. God blessed the seventh day. Now this should ring some bells with us, thinking back to Genesis chapter 1. What did God do when He created the plant life and the animal life and even Adam and Eve there in the garden? What was God's blessing to them? He blessed them and said what? Be fruitful and multiply. He blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply. And we see this motif, if you will, repeating itself on the seventh day. God blessed the seventh day and He made it holy. In blessing the seventh day, I believe God was blessing the seventh day as that which would spiritually multiply and bring forth fruit. Let me explain to you what I mean. Creation is complete. Man and all of creation is at rest in the Creator. There's peace. There's relationship. There's unity. There's harmony. Adam and Eve are living with God in this creation, literally, I believe, basking in God's continual revelation of Himself to them. There was nothing lacking whatsoever for their spiritual and their physical happiness. God blessed the seventh day as a day in which His revelation of Himself to His created creature man continues to flower and blossom and to unfold. God blessed the seventh day, and I believe the seventh day was fruitful, and the knowledge of Adam and Eve about the God who created them multiplied. But our text also tells us that God made this seventh day holy. He made it holy. Brother Harry has preached to us a number of times on the holiness of God. And one of the things that's quite interesting here is we think about the law first mentioned in Scripture. This is literally the very first thing that God consecrates and makes holy, is this seventh day. There's something very special about this seventh day. God consecrates it, and He makes it holy. You know, we often hear the language that man was God's crowning glory, God's crowning jewel in creation. But after studying this text fairly extensively for several months now, I would question that. It was the seventh day that God consecrated and made holy. And it was the first thing that He made holy in all of creation. I believe He did this to commemorate His creation, to set this day apart. You remember the number 7 means what? It means completion. It means perfection. It means all is done. And this seventh day was a day when God declared, my perfection, my creation is perfect. It is finished. All is done. There's nothing lacking. In God making this day holy, there's one other point that I want to touch on before we move on, and that is this. You will notice that in all of the previous 6 days, there was the statement, and there was morning and there was evening the first day, morning and evening the second day, morning and evening the third day, and so on. If you look carefully at the text here, there's no morning and evening to this consecrated, blessed, holy seventh day on which God rested. There's no morning, there's no evening. And if you go back to my statement last week, God's creation was perfect and lacking nothing. So when God rested from His creation, it has been from that seventh day until now a perpetual rest. God has never again, Justin, taken up His work of creation, of the creation of the physical cosmos. This rest to which is referred here is a rest that is perpetual. It is ongoing. There is no conclusion to God's rest on this seventh day. Now, keep that in the back of your mind as we continue to work our way through this passage. And also, I'm simply trying to lay the foundation here today. This is going to be a 2-part sermon, which we will try to conclude next week. But I want you to get this foundational information set into your mind, and then when we begin to unfold this next week, it will be rich. Secondly, let's consider this passage under the heading of creation resting. This is so good. This rest to which is referred here is a rest in which God's creation participated. It is the rest of God. It is a rest that He possesses. It is a rest that is His, but it is a rest in which His original creation participated. One thing that I found extraordinarily intriguing in studying through this is a statement in the 15th verse of this 2nd chapter. And the Lord took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to keep it.